I thought it would be kind of cool to talk about the different problem-solving styles of Carter, McKay, and Rush. Because in every Stargate, there is always this character that a lot of times is the scientist that has to kind of we know the typical scenario. They have to solve this problem that's completely insurmountable and impossible to solve in a completely unrealistic amount of time. And I think all of these characters have kind of their unique ways of solving problems and also their unique approaches that kind of add to character dynamics, I think, that add to the character dynamics in the show and how they interact in these high intensity situations. So I thought we could talk about all three. And I mean, I guess we can kind of maybe talk a little bit about each of them individually, starting with Carter. And then we can kind of maybe compare and contrast and talk about how we think that maybe what flavors that added to each of the shows.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what do you have any initial thoughts on, like, say, Carter you want to share and her problem solving style? Or when I say, what do you think of Carter problem solving? What is like the first thing that comes to your mind?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is how she kind of always tries to explain her ideas to Jack, and then he'll just be like, "What are you talking about?"
Oh, true.
So that's like the first thing that comes to mind. I do feel like, um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like in SG1, it's kind of like she tends to. I'm trying to remember as the seasons progress, it's kind of like she's always like the person to come up with solution kind of thing. And sometimes it will almost feel as if it's like on her own. And then as the seasons kind of continue, it sometimes involves others that kind of help her reach that conclusion. And sometimes, like what I've noticed, like on the rewatch that I've been watching with my daughter, is we've kind of noticed that sometimes Carter sometimes actually has a little bit of arrogance, not arrogance, but like I guess a little bit of stubbornness sometimes when she'll come up with what she thinks is a solution if someone else is trying to help. So it's like when there was an episode, I don't remember what the name of the episode is. I think it's in season 7 where
Hmm.
she's working with Coombs
Hmm.
or no, Felger or Felger. Is that how you say it, Felger? Because I swear he says his name Felger, but other people say Felger.
You know
Anyways,
what? I don't trust me on that. I would guess Felger. So maybe
I've
it is
always thought
Felger.
Felger, and then in the episode, I swore Jack says that, but I swore that Felger himself says Felger, and that
Ah,
Carter says Felger. I think I could be wrong, but anyways, you know who I'm talking about, right?
of course,
And
yes.
and in it, like it's the episode where he initially screws up, or they think it's because he screwed up, and the Stargate won't dial out or something like that, or dial in, like it won't allow people to come back basically. It's left like where people are stuck. And in that I did feel like Carter, that's kind of like an episode where Carter kind of almost initially like trusts him, and but as soon as like she realizes that it doesn't work, it's almost like then she puts the blame on him. So I do notice like a little bit of
Wait, really?
stubborn, yeah, a little bit of stubbornness on her part that
Oh
that
my gosh.
that is funny to me that I never actually noticed before. So I feel like she's
Huh.
so incredibly smart, but she has a little bit of a stubborn nature when it comes to if her idea doesn't work. Yes, she's very hard on herself. Um, but I feel like when she's working with others, it's almost like she gets irritated. Similar to, I think, an episode that maybe you would be mentioning, which is when she works with what is it? Haley, is it? Is that her
Hmm.
name? The cadet. Like, is that Prodigy? Is that what it's
Yes,
called?
Prodigy.
Like if you remember with that, like she was trying to teach her to like handle things in a certain way, but almost in a sense she was also showing her stubbornness as well. I think like both of them were stubborn in my
Ah,
opinion, with how to kind of go about ideas, and being open to various ideas and stuff, which I think eventually she turns around to. Like if something
yeah.
else that's not her idea works, she will do and support it. But I feel like it sometimes takes a little bit of time. But I don't know. Do you feel the same way, or do you feel like that's
That
completely
is
different?
that is such an interesting observation. Like, I mean, honestly, I wouldn't have thought about that, but that's totally, you're completely correct that a lot of times she's very stubborn and steadfast in her ideas. And maybe especially early on in the show, like when they
Hmm.
kind of had the characters more, they were all a little bit more, I think, pushing against certain things in the
Yeah.
character moments. But it's interesting because you brought up Prodigy, and the thing that always stuck out to me the most in the Prodigy episode specifically um, is at the end when her like Haley is kind of arguing with her about which theory is correct, and like in there's this sort of a circumstance where if they do the thing that Carter says they should do, it will pretty much save them regardless of whether it's correct or not. And Haley wants to know what the answer is. Like she wants to know if
Yeah.
it's correct. And Carter says something like, in the end, it doesn't really matter which one of us is right. We need to just live, right? And so that aspect always kind of stuck out to me as like,
Yeah.
the scientist is like, yes, there's this aspect of looking for the truth, but then there's this aspect of solving the problem so that we can effectively like either save ourselves or leave or get through. And so that is the funny thing, is that is the part that stuck out to me in Prodigy.
Yeah.
Is always that moment. It's like it doesn't matter which one of us is right. It doesn't matter. We need to get out of here.
Yeah. No, that's so right. Like, and I think what's interesting about that is that does stick out to me, but for some reason, the parts that happened before it, since I haven't watched that episode like recently, for some reason,
Hmm.
the part that stands out to my memory before that is kind of um Haley and Carter kind of like always getting on each other's nerves and almost kind of like
Yes.
battling it out. And it's kind of like the battle of like the two people that are used to always kind of being like the brain that everyone trusts kind of thing. And it's like, no, my way's right. No, your way, my way's right kind of attitude. And so it's kind of like, I feel like there was that battle of the brains a little bit until the very end. So
Hmm.
for some reason that's what sticks out in my mind, but you are very right that like um the Haley character, like she's like I think still quite young at that point and learning things and is more about like, well, is my way right, and like and Carter's more mature in that sense where she's just like, does that really matter?
Yeah, we need to
you
live.
know
Like, because then
yeah,
she asked, like, why does like I think it was like the decision O'Neill made to go with whatever, and
yeah,
and she said, well, it doesn't matter which one of us is right. He knows that this way will keep us alive, and it will, it will only risk his life, and that's the important thing.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I think, I mean, I thought that was very interesting. I mean, of course, there's the other aspect that really sticks out to me in terms of Sam's problem solving is that a lot of her thinking tends to be very risky and outside the box.
yes,
Like, and it always like comes to my mind when she was working with McKay. And I mean, it is interesting because then, I mean, how McKay is later on, but when she was working with McKay, I think he's a little bit more inside the realm of things and a little bit more pessimistic, right? Where she, I
yes,
think, is a little bit more of an idealist and sometimes to an extent where things go wrong.
yeah.
But I think then sometimes it is needed for things to go really right. And it always, the scene sticks out to me when McKay, talks to her about wanting to be a pianist. And which is a very funny scene, like because first he says, I always wanted to be a pianist. And she's like, what? Because she heard something else.
Yeah,
Um, but it's a very funny, actually a really interesting scene because then he explains how um, like she's an artist, and that's kind of
yeah,
like basically as a scientist she's an artist because she can think about things in ways that are kind of different. And I think in terms of for SG1, like everything they encounter and how different things are and how um, outside of the realm of what they're used to operating in
yeah.
is, I think that aspect of her problem solving is very nice addition to the show.
Yeah, and it's very needed, right? Because if someone just worked within the realm of what made sense before the Stargate was, discovered and other planets and all these different things, like it wouldn't they wouldn't be able to solve the problems that they have or get out of those near death situations if it wasn't for all that. I mean, like, because isn't there, like, I don't know what episode it is where Carter blows up, is it
Yeah,
the
she
sun?
she blows up a sun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like this is and it's necessary, or oh, we do this slingshot maneuver, or we have to go, basically make ourselves completely out of phase for 30 seconds to do this thing. And a lot of it is very unconventional. I think she has crazy ideas that are very much needed. And I mean, I think in terms of character dynamics, it's interesting because you have in a lot of this sort of situations, you have, as you said, you always remember Carter explaining a thing and O'Neill kind of not understanding.
Yeah.
And I think in SG1, you have this sort of expansive feeling and they're kind of unsure. Like everybody is not really sure what's going on yet. Whereas in Atlantis, like they're a little bit more sure. They're still unsure because they're in a different galaxy with different enemies. But in terms of what everybody knows, what we're used to, like they know that there's more out there. And
Yeah.
SG1, they don't necessarily. And so it's a different kind of feeling. And I think there's this sort of, venturing outward into where we haven't gone feeling. And so sometimes, yeah, she says something, O'Neill doesn't necessarily know what's going on. Sometimes he or Hammond argues with her. So there is this pushback against her crazy ideas sometimes. For sure, there's
Yeah.
times when, like even, I think it's the one where like O'Neill has this thing that goes through him, right?
Yeah.
And first she says, "Oh, we need to starve it," and then she says, "No, we need to give it all the energy." And Hammond just like, "What?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think there's times like that, but I think that's kind of it works really well with the character dynamic and
Yeah.
how everybody is. That she's kind of more idealistic. I mean, not idealistic, but more risk taking. Like that she's
Yeah.
willing to take more risks and yeah, I mean, there is sometimes pushback, and sometimes there's kind of everybody else has no idea, so they.
Yeah. I think too, though, that's why like it sometimes irritates me in like some of the beginning SG1 episodes because it's kind of like you have that where Carter comes up with wonky ideas and like or even other characters will come up with like weird ideas that work and then you have things that will happen that then everyone questions them like for example when Daniel went into like the mental institute like mental hospital thing
Right, right,
and
right.
like everyone was like questioning him like as if like and just assumed he had lost it or like times when Jonas has like seen something or come up with an idea and then they all question him about it and I'm always just like but so many wonky things have happened, so many weird ideas have been created by every single one of those characters and yet they don't believe those other characters when something weird
Right?
is happening.
I mean, oh my gosh, they didn't even Sam, they didn't believe when she was visited by the ascended being, remember? So it's like they're
Yeah.
like, "Nope, you need rest, something's
Yeah.
wrong." So you're right. Sometimes it's kind of like
It's like all of a
suspend
sudden, out
disbelief.
of nowhere, suddenly they're just like not thinking of it from like a very like open viewpoint where they would imagine like things to do with an alien stuff would make sense. Then they just think like very like earth-minded, like oh no, that's not possible.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So out of curiosity, would you consider Carter to be more cool-headed or anxious under pressure?
Oh yeah, I think she's definitely very cool-headed. I mean, I think, if anything, she just gets frustrated if people don't initially accept her idea or see where she's coming from. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think if you think of times when they've been, in a ship somewhere where something awful could happen and they need to all think like really quick and figure out how to survive it. Like she's never like seeming anxious and freaking out, right? Like she's always like trying to logically think about what makes sense to get it all to work. And she uses her knowledge of science and everything to do that. And so, but yeah, so then you go to McKay, right? And that's the complete opposite where he's very,
Yeah.
very anxious, right?
At
Um,
least outwardly.
yeah. I mean, have you ever seen Carter as being anxious, or because I don't remember seeing something where I would feel she was.
No, I would say I feel like Carter almost thrives under this situations.
Yeah.
Like where there's a problem in front of me. Like there's a problem in front of me, I have to solve it. This is how I'm thriving. This is what I like, the thing that kind of puts puts life in your life.
Yeah.
Like she does, because it even shows like times when she's having fun outside of work, she's doing problem solving. Or in that episode where I mean, I thought this was kind of an interesting thing with learning curve with Marin when
Mhm.
she wanted to understand herself how the reactor worked and figure out something for herself. And I remember Marin going, "Why did you want to figure that out when I could have just told you the solution?" And she's like, "What would have been the fun in that?"
Yes. Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
there's this kind of innate drive to solve problems that also maybe leads to this kind of creativity in problem solving,
Yeah. Yeah.
which then, like you said, at least outwardly, McKay has the complete opposite.
Yes.
Because the classic circumstance in Atlantis where he is frantic, like, Shepard is, "You gotta solve this problem. You got like 2 minutes, McKay," and he's like, "I can't. It's never gonna work. This is this and this," and it's like super. Everything he said is super outwardly pessimistic. But I mean, what do you think about McKay and his problem solving?
Well, what I think is interesting with McKay is if you think about it, when we first are introduced to him, he's not used to, you know, being anywhere but Earth and mainly dealing with earthly kind of problems. That he kind of sees things in a very from a very specific lens, I think, that shifts and changes as you
Yes.
see him on Atlantis. So it's kind of like when we're first introduced to him, he's very, very arrogant, very condescending and annoying. And he seems very like set on, oh, well, this is what's going to work. And then if he's proven wrong, it's still an element of arrogance, not fully willing to admit that he's wrong. And which he still does throughout Atlantis if he does like screw up and his idea doesn't work. But I feel like from what I can remember, since I haven't gotten to a rewatch of Atlantis yet,
Yeah.
um,
Same.
from what I can remember from like day one of McKay, he's like panicking. He's so
Yes.
like freaking out, and like people have to try and get him to like focus, but it's almost like that anxiety works for him in the same way that like Carter keeping her cool under pressure works for her. It's like his little tool that somehow makes him and forces him to come up with sometimes out of the box ideas in a sense because he's being forced to, because he's terrified of dying or having some
Yes.
horrendous thing happen. That I think it kind of like has kind of almost created and made that character evolve to what he ends up being because of his anxiety and these high pressure situations that he initially probably wasn't used to being in. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, crazy anxious. And I actually love that about his character. I love that they show that side of things because it only makes sense that when you're in these situations that you would be anxious. Like that makes total sense.
Mhm. Yeah, no, totally. But I think it's like also in the character dynamics, it works in the like I also find it works in the show because I find that Shepard's character, like in contrast to say O'Neill, who had from the very beginning, he kind of on the one hand was a little bit anti-scientist, on another hand, he either pretended to or really didn't understand.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of this kind of comedic relief in this sense. I think because of the nature of Atlantis and the expedition, the specific character of Shepard has kind of a little bit more of like this optimistic, um, like exploratory nature.
Mhm.
And so I think it really helps that McKay has this counter energy.
Yes. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when you find that Shepard's like, "Come on, we got to make this work," and McKay, if McKay had more of a like, if you imagine Shepard working with Carter, Carter would be like, well, yeah, of course I can do that. Give me 5 minutes. I can just, hotwire this thing and do this thing, whereas to have the balance, the counterbalance of this, where McKay is like, oh my God, I can't do that. What do you mean? I can't take this pressure. There's 3 minutes. We're never going to make it. It's never going to work. Like, it actually really adds to the character dynamic, I think.
Yeah. No, exactly. Like, that's why I was even thinking as you were saying that with his dynamic with Zelenka.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because they kind of that's always brought like some like great humor into the show, I think, with their dynamic, because both of them kind of feed off of each other's anxiety and both of them freak
Mm-hmm.
out.
Yes, that's so true. I love it. And yeah, it's a perfect
But you
dynamic.
are right in terms of like the main team when
Yeah,
you're thinking of Shepard and McKay, and then you're thinking of like the other characters, um, it does like it's nice because I think like if everyone was too cool, calm, and collected all the time, it maybe would make the situations not be portrayed in the light that they're wanting them to be portrayed. Um, and also too, like even just like thinking of like how like it's funny with McKay, like how it's like he's fake arrogant. I mean, arrogance, I guess, in a sense, is always fake, right? Because when people are
yeah,
typically arrogant, it's because they don't feel good about themselves, really. And so they overdo it. Um, but it's like McKay always has this like arrogance about him. And then that anxiety takes away from that arrogance. So, in a sense, I think it kind of
that's
makes him
true.
more likable. Um,
That's true. That's true.
yeah, because if he was just like the whole time, just like, oh, I can do this. I know I like always come up with the best ideas and all this
Hmm.
stuff, and then it always works. Like, imagine how irritating watching that character would be,
It
you
would be
know?
like watching Kavanaugh and like, I mean, which is great.
Yeah,
Kavanaugh is a fantastic character to hate, but you don't want a main
yeah,
character like that because then
yes,
you're never going
yeah,
to root for them. You're gonna be like, oh my God, I want all the bad things to happen to them. Um,
yeah,
but it's interesting you mentioned that because I think it's such like that's one other aspect of between Carter and McKay is that Carter has this need to like, solve the problem, but I think it's more of like a puzzle thing
yeah,
about finding the answer, about figuring it out, about getting out of the situation, about doing the thing. Like it's kind of more of a like an internal drive to to problem solve.
hmm,
Whereas I think you mentioned sometimes like McKay, like how there is the way how he is with Zelenka, there is how he is with his ideas, and I think sometimes, at least outwardly, he has this presentation of being a little bit more attached to being his ideas being correct and his ideas being good and his own
yeah,
like, um, and I think they do explore that also when they introduce his sister and they introduce some of his crazy ideas, and I think probably one of the I mean, it's kind of an interesting turning point. When I was looking into, specific episodes that explored problem solving of McKay, I stumbled on the Trinity episode,
hmm,
which is the one where he had that crazy energy idea. Again, I'm a little bit far from, I'm just gonna, far from watching it, so I don't remember all of the details. But I do remember that he tried to convince Shepard that it would work and it wouldn't overload and cause this problem. And of course, it caused the problem, even though he was entirely committed to it. And then I remembered a scene at the end of this where, he's asking Shepard if he can ever trust him again. And Shepard is kind of like, well, it's going to take some time. And this was kind of a very serious, a little bit more serious of where, oh, McKay had this idea, it turned out being wrong,
yeah,
and it kind of betrayed their relate. I mean, they built their relationship back, but it was like this was kind of a serious thing. I think this was season two.
yeah,
Um, but I felt like that was also kind of a little bit, like, there's always these turning point moments for McKay where he kind of moved away from being just this kind of like being portrayed as this like arrogant scientist that is always right, and I think that was one of those moments. um
yes, yeah. I think Yeah, that I do remember that. I don't remember exactly what that episode was about, but I do remember that feeling of McKay just kind of like almost being like really down on himself because he knows that like he screwed up and then he has, a fellow person that like put so much trust in him to then tell him that it will take a long time before he trusts him again. And so I almost think that would probably like be like soul crushing to him.
Yeah.
Um, because like you mentioned his sister and I think it's so funny when his sister comes onto the
Mm-hmm.
scene and calls him Meredith um
Yep.
and there's that whole dynamic of him always feeling like he needs to prove that he's smarter than his sister because his sister like maybe figures out something before him, that kind of thing. That also like then takes me back to how we were talking about, the cadet Haley, because it's kind of like um imagine if those two had to like
Oh my
work
gosh.
together. Like if it was those two, they both would probably still be arguing about whose idea was right.
100%, 100%. Totally, totally. And I think, I mean, it's almost like when you look at McKay's sister, it's like it must be like something that almost is like a fear, or that McKay, like, because it's like, I think she is portrayed to be a little bit actually smarter than him,
Yeah,
like more capable, but yet she abandoned all of this to just live a normal life. And it's
yeah,
like his kind of the opposite, like he has to have this, without this, what is he? Um,
yeah.
which is interesting. Whereas um, I can't imagine there being a parallel with Carter, because I don't think she quite has the same personal. I think her personal issues were much more like interpersonal and emotional with like her dad and her brother, and whereas I do think there's a little bit of like with McKay this kind of mirroring feeling going on, that
Yeah,
they're that it's like he sees some of himself, but also the things he fears kind of in his sister, so.
exactly. Yeah, that's really like a really good way of putting it for sure. Um, yeah. And how do you think about so when we did the our Stargate concert thing, I chose one of
Hmm.
my favorite episodes, Grace Under Pressure, to do the like music inspired by that. And so that's an episode that we've mentioned before that it involves McKay and Carter, but it's like Carter as a figment of his imagination. Like, do you feel that that kind of plays on what you were just talking about, where he's kind of always feeling like he needs to prove that he can come up with the idea? And in that moment, it's almost like he had to have Carter appear in order for him to
Yeah.
try and figure things out because ultimately he has that insecurity that he doesn't necessarily feel like he can always figure it out, that someone else is going to figure out before him. So even his hallucinations were of Carter instead of,
Yeah.
him just thinking it through.
Oh, totally. Oh, totally. And I think it's also like when you really look back into like his first interaction with Carter, and then him saying like she could solve the problems because she could think in this certain way. And then that's what he manifests in order to solve his problem. And I know it's like it's couched in this cute, like he is attracted to her kind of thing, but I
Yeah.
think there's also this like slight insecurity, or at least knowing, oh, this is what I need to pull from to solve the problem. I
Yeah.
think it's very interesting because I mean, this is of course parallel episode to Grace, which was the same episode with Carter. Like Carter
Mhm.
has the Grace episode, he has the Grace Under Pressure, where she's kind of stranded on the ship and she has to figure out what's going on, and she has hit her head. And but it's interesting that in her experience, she's working more through interpersonal things, like in this
Yes.
and kind of with people, and it's more emotional and interpersonal, which kind of reflects her you know, like the trajectory of her character being more impact, like in this particular sense, this kind of personal sense is more like interpersonal, her relationships with people and how that impacted her. Like, especially I think early on in the show is very reflected that her relationship with her dad
Yeah.
is extremely important to the character development. And I think in McKay's, it's, yeah, you're right. It's exactly that comes up. That's a very good way of looking at it, that he needs to manifest Carter. to
Yeah.
solve his problem. Like
Yeah.
that's a very good way of looking, and it kind of like reflects his insecurity perfect, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you should
For
write an
sure.
analysis of that episode and and publish it because I'm not sure that that has been discussed. You know, a lot of people bring it up like, oh, he just wanted to like see her boobs or naked or something, and it's like, well, no, you're right. It's totally that the. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's also like that other layer. He manifests her like that to kind of hide the fact that he really doesn't need her, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh
Too
wow, that's
funny.
very. I wonder, did the writers, did you intend this? Because yeah,
Yeah.
which is interesting. And I mean, I guess if we want to go into Rush and kind of contrast this,
Yeah.
is his approach to problem solving is completely different because I think he has, like, at least my understanding, he does have this kind of obsessive nature that, like, I mean, both Carter and McKay have this obsessive nature about solving
Hmm.
problems for different reasons. Um, I think he needs to know things, kind of similar, like he has to find answers to things. But it's interesting because I find that Rush has this way of problem solving, at least in this character dynamic sense, that he always kind of does it on his own without telling anyone
Yeah.
and like tries to address it without even, and sometimes to the point where he has hidden solutions that he's made that even like hindered things going on because people didn't know. So I think his approach is actually, you know, where they kind of play off of other characters while they're problem solving. It's like he retreats from the characters.
Yeah. He's very much a loner, right? Like he very much prefers his own space. And I think the only time, so I've seen up to the first few episodes of season 2 through my rewatch. So I don't really remember what happens after the point that I've seen. But what I've seen up to I think it's like episode 3 of season 2. What I've seen up so far up to that point is that, like you said, he always kind of goes away and figures out things. And I'm trying to remember because it's been a little while since I've watched SGU, but he had found like I think like a secret part of the ship that no one knows about
Hmm.
yet. At least that's where I'm at in it. No one knows that he's found that yet. And sure, he's kind of hallucinating his passed on wife, so I guess there's a hallucination there. But maybe there'll be more sense of that later that I haven't seen yet. Maybe it's not a hallucination. I don't know. But he's kind of like always very secretive and it's always for
Hmm.
his benefit as opposed to the greater good of everyone, in my opinion, so far. So far from what I've seen, I feel like he doesn't too much do anything that is for the greater good of everyone, even though he will say it is, because he ultimately has some sort of secretive goal that no one else knows about. So sometimes
Yep.
he'll do things that will save like a situation or people, but there's always a reason for it that benefits him solely, like whatever he's searching for. And the
Yep.
only time I remember seeing something where he seems to work well was when he was on Earth and you see him working with that girl that they end up having use the stone to help him with a problem. I don't remember what her name was, but she was, I
Amanda Perry?
maybe was she the disabled
Yes.
one. And when they show flashbacks of when he used to like work with her, he seems like a whole different person, would be excited to kind of like talk through ideas and kind of they'd be figuring things out. And even when she did like visit in a sense of through the stone, like the whatever it's called, the stones, um
Hmm.
he seems to have a different part of his personality show that I think that's why it's so different is that he then is more social and is more
Yes,
collaborative, whereas
definitely.
otherwise everything else so far up to what I've seen at least, he shuts down and goes inward and tries to figure out all out himself. And
Yep.
I do think that puts a pressure on him that he sometimes is disappointed in himself because he gets frustrated if he can't figure something out. Which then makes him very obsessive. I feel like he's much more obsessive than Carter and McKay. So,
Yes, that's true. No, I
yeah.
completely agree. Like even to Whereas I think, like, I do think McKay has this kind of identification with his ability to do this, but I don't think it's to the level of Rush.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you said, like, I feel like Rush has some kind of problem solving or agenda that he perceives as for something greater than him necessarily, but I don't think it's reflective of the crew. Like I think this is like when you say it's not beneficial to anyone else, I think it's not beneficial to anyone in the crew. I think in his case the crew is almost collateral damage of his
Ah, good
plan.
point.
Like
Yeah.
it's like of what he's trying to do. Um, but I think what he's trying to do, he probably perceives as something that is like for the a greater good or something like something that
Yeah.
like humanity's greatest thing. I don't know. Maybe I'll feel differently by the end of the show because I also didn't finish it. Um, but uh, I think in his case, there is this aspect where like you said, he's very secretive and he doesn't tell anybody. And I think part of that is in SG1 and Atlantis. I mean, a lot of people have described these two shows as some like as competence porn. Basically, that everybody in the show is extremely competent, and
Mhm.
that's why you like it. Is that everybody's extremely competent, and in Universe, you get a lot of people that are put on the ship. And I mean, you have people like Eli that were brought there because they're so competent, but you have people that are just there because of happenstance. And I get this impression that with Rush, some of this is like maybe he doesn't believe anybody is necessarily competent enough. And so he
Yeah.
doesn't, whereas they're like and that's why maybe he works so well with Amanda Perry. He senses that they can bounce ideas. And I mean, of course, like, sure, McKay probably did believe that he could do things, but I mean, he had Zelenka, and I know deep down inside he believes Zelenka, had something.
Yeah.
He maybe was even insecure about himself versus Zelenka at times. So I
Yeah.
think that maybe Rush has that unique thing that he doesn't think anyone else is necessarily competent enough to sort of bounce the ideas or work through things.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, that definitely is a good way of putting it because um if I remember correctly, like he's at first very annoyed by Eli and doesn't want him
Mm-hmm.
to do anything until like I think he's kind of forced to almost have him help him. And
Mm-hmm.
even then, I feel like he manipulates situations a lot. So
Yes.
sometimes he may not necessarily think they're fully competent, but he knows that he can get them to do just enough to help him in the direction that he's trying to go without them even knowing it. And so it's kind of like he always has some sort of ulterior motive, at least in the sense of him being stuck on this ship, right? Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure if his character would be like that, if it was
Mm-hmm.
just like a normal, everyday kind of scenario where he's on Earth and helping, trying to figure out things. Like, I think in extreme circumstances, the worst of his character shines.
Yes. Yes.
And almost to like a delusional sense where I feel like he's battling his own mind to convince himself that what he's doing is right. And like you said, for the overall good of the world in
Yeah.
his mind. But I really think a lot of times, most of what he does um, really only benefits him and his curiosity.
Yep. That's so true. It's very true. It's very true. I think in the end, like his end game is that, yeah. And I think it's a very, yeah, it's an interesting circumstance because I think also he doesn't always reveal information that
Yeah.
is important and relevant to even the other, like even if he keeps it from the whole crew, he doesn't necessarily reveal it to the other leaders that
Yeah.
are on the ship. And so I think that's a little
Do
like a
you
little bit where he
Yeah. Do you think it's kind of a vibe of SGU though in general? Like everyone in a sense has their own secrets. Like
Yes.
when Young basically nearly killed Rush, right?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't let anyone know his plan with that until he actually like did it. He basically had to have it that um when it was well, because it was Rush and the other guy. What's the other guy's name? Um, oh, I can't remember. The other guy that was like there, I forget fully because it's been a little while since I've watched SGU, but it was basically when he had to like deprive him of oxygen. But it was
Hmm.
like I can't remember if this is when Rush
Telford?
was, yes. Yeah, so Telford and Rush had swapped bodies, and so he
Hmm.
basically could have like almost killed the both of them. Um,
Hmm.
but he didn't really tell anyone like what the plan was because at that point you don't realize he's doing that on purpose so that the guy Telford like remembers because like he had been like had that weird thing where he had forgotten and was kind of being controlled by that other by the what are they called? Lucian
Lucian
Alliance?
Alliance, yeah.
Um and so yeah, so I do feel like you do have a lot of secrecy throughout that whole ship in SGU, compared to Atlantis and SG1. Um,
Totally, totally.
so
No, I
that's
completely.
maybe part of the vibe of the show too, the
Yeah,
mystery.
exactly. And I think it actually, in this sense, like where you can look at Carter's dynamic and how she solves problems works really well for the characters in the show there.
Yeah,
And McKay's works excellently for Atlantis. Like I don't think Carter in McKay's position would have been as an effective as a character, and
yeah,
vice versa.
yeah,
And I think also Rush, like having this particular character with these dynamics and this kind of secrecy in this environment is much more, I think it works much better for the overall show. And I mean, if you can imagine a universe like the SG universe, like the show, imagine it. But like instead of Rush kind of going off on his own in the secret part of the ship and like bouncing weird ideas, and so everybody's left in the dark. If you imagine like Rush and Young and Eli sitting there like openly solving problems in the same way, it would just be a bad show. Like it would not work. Like I think the
yeah,
secrecy is kind of part of the intrigue because then they kind of wonder what's going on because sometimes there are things that happen that they don't know about because Rush did something or he didn't do something, and that kind of adds
exactly.
to this aspect where they are in the dark and they don't know what's going on, and it adds this cool layer to the show. So I think that's like in that sense he's like the perfect kind of way of dealing with it in this context.
Yes, exactly. And it's kind of a funny thought to like try and think of McKay or Carter being in Rush's position.
Hmm.
Like it would feel so out of place. I think like you said, it's like with the vibe of the show, it makes sense. And I do really love that about Universe. I think
Hmm.
the layer of mystery that's behind everyone on the show. Like you always are trying to figure out like what's happening there, or how certain things are connected, or what certain things mean. So it's like a big like mystery game in a sense put into show form. Um, that yeah, but I mean it's so like interesting actually. Like I think you came up with the idea of us talking about this, and I think it's actually kind of fascinating to try and like get the brain to go back to think about Carter, McKay, and Rush and think of how they all handle things differently, and how it works and how it creates how we feel about those characters. Like I wouldn't have necessarily thought to kind of think back about those things until you brought it up, but I think it's like actually very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So here's a question that I just thought of. What do you think Rush would manifest if he was in like a Grace Under Pressure type episode?
Oh, I kind of feel like he would actually, and the reason I'm thinking this is because in an episode of SGU, I believe, it was like an episode where they were kind of like hallucinating things that they fear, and he
Mm-hmm.
kept seeing those aliens. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he would hallucinate that because
Hmm.
he would almost be using that fear to kind of help him figure a way out. And it's
Oh,
almost
that's a good.
like a panic of like, oh, these aliens are coming to get me. They're going to put me back in that weird tank thing, hook me up to all those weird things. I don't know what's going to happen, kind of vibe, and like potentially work in his favor. But that could also work against him because if I remember in the episode where he saw that, like he actually was quite terrified and kind of like hid in a corner kind of thing and cause like harm to people. So I don't know if that would work, but I could imagine him kind of like hallucinating something really chaotic that didn't
Hmm.
exist. Like he would be imagining like the ship being pulled apart by these aliens or they're coming after him and he's needing to do something to like stay safe and somehow maybe that would help him.
Hmm. Hmm.
How about
That no,
you?
that is so true. I mean, it's funny because I know like he does go into this certain part of the ship where he like either hallucinates or whatever some people. And so I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, there's this part of me that wants to say, okay, he would hallucinate his wife or Amanda Perry or Eli or somebody like, but I kind of want to say he would actually hallucinate no one, and it would
Oh,
be himself because he can figure it out himself.
very good point. That very well could be the case. Yeah. Yeah. It's either no one or complete chaos. I don't think there's any in between.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's gonna be something in that realm. Yeah, I don't think it would be something so predictable like Amanda Perry. Like that I like that's the first thing that came to my mind, but I'm like, you know what though? That's super like predictable, like of course. And so maybe it would be no one. Or yeah, total chaos
Yeah. And
for
if
those
it
aliens.
was Carter, I think she would hallucinate Jack, is
Yeah.
what I think. Because I think like he's sometimes been there for her in times where she's really needed like that emotional support when things
I
are
mean,
too
I
hard
think
for her.
she did in Grace.
Oh, did she?
Hallucinate
See,
Jack.
I don't remember that episode very well at all. Like I need to rewatch it.
It's
Um,
coming for you because you're in season 7, right? Of your
yeah.
rewatch. It's coming. I mean, it's basically like the version of Grace Under Pressure. So, but it's a her first version of it. Um, and I'm pretty sure he shows up. I mean, a lot of
Okay.
people show up, but I'm pretty sure maybe I'm wrong. And somebody in the comments will be like, "Nope, she was totally wrong. He didn't show up." But I'm pretty sure that's where he shows up and
Oh, okay.
says like, "I'm here for you. I'm always here." Something like that.
Yeah, probably. That would make sense.
But yeah, I would be curious, people in the comments, to tell us what you think about the different kind of problem solving styles. Also, what are some of your favorite episodes where they had to solve problems really quickly or particular problems that came up that you thought were really interesting solutions that they found? That kind of thing.